What's up, guys? Anita's making some pumpkin muffins right now, and I'll be eating those in a little bit. I've got a couple oranges that I'm just going to start the morning off with. We're all just hanging out here today. It's the last day of Christmas vacation or winter vacation for us. So I'll be going back to school or work tomorrow. The kids will be going back to school. Anita has to go back to work tomorrow. So we're all just kind of hanging out here. This video is going to be about B12 deficiency, but first I'm going to show you my meals for breakfast, and then we'll get to that in a bit. So breakfast was excellent. Anita made the pumpkin muffins, and I put some peanut butter on mine, and I had that with some soy milk, which you guys can see in the picture there. And now I am having some white tea with maple syrup and some soy milk. But this video is going to be talking about the topic of vitamin B12 deficiency, who kind of should be looking out, maybe kind of some of the, I'll talk about the symptoms and talk about how you end up getting vitamin B12 deficiency. In a clinical setting, people that are coming in that are sick, I see vitamin B12 deficiency probably quite a bit more often than the average person does. Now, I will say that in the past several years, I have seen maybe a dozen vegans and vegetarians, and I don't think that any of them have had a vitamin B12 deficiency. So the kind of stereotype that vegans and vegetarians are the ones that really need to watch out for vitamin B12 deficiency at least doesn't ring true in my personal experience. The overwhelming majority of people that do have vitamin B12 deficiency generally have it because their body has stopped producing something called intrinsic factor. And intrinsic factor is what carries vitamin B12 throughout the body. It's a carrier, it's kind of like a carrier protein that's produced in the stomach. And when you don't produce this, which happens for a variety of reasons, then no matter how much vitamin B12 you do or do not eat, it's not going to be carried to the rest of the body, and you're not going to be able to use vitamin B12 in any way. So you are going to develop a deficiency as a result of that. That is the most common reason. Aging, as people age, their body's ability to produce intrinsic factor slows down, and that's probably the most common reason that vitamin B12 deficiency is seen in a clinical setting. Now, there are some other symptoms that come up as a result of vitamin B12 deficiency. But some of the other kind of factors that will come into play with that is usually gastrointestinal things. So if you have a lot of gastrointestinal distress, or if anybody's had any kind of like bariatric surgery, if anyone's had any kind of surgery that works on the gastrointestinal system, then they're going to be at largely increased risk for vitamin B12 deficiency. Some diseases like Crohn's disease can cause malabsorption of vitamin B12, largely due to intrinsic factor. So you can kind of see that intrinsic factor really comes into play in a lot of these different areas. Any type of gastrointestinal distress will cause that to be problematic. And some of the symptoms that come up in that are really difficult because they're symptoms that come up in a huge, large amount of, variety of different diseases and different things that may be just the common stomach bug or something like that. But like gastrointestinal distress is something that can cause you not to produce intrinsic factor, and as a result you'll develop a B12 deficiency. B12 deficiency also, in turn, causes a lot of gastrointestinal distress. And part of that has to do with the body's energy systems and the way that we use B12 as not as an energy source, but we use B12 as kind of like a carrier. It's used in our muscles to produce energy. If you're not able to do that, then it's going to cause difficulty in digesting. So there's a lot of things that kind of go hand in hand. They go back and forth, I guess. Depression and other mental things are usually associated with vitamin B12 deficiency. a lack of energy, some kind of neurological, like tingling of the fingers is a common association that people will relate to vitamin B12 deficiency. Now, I know that you often see that vegans and vegetarians are, mentioned in relationship to vitamin B12, but people who eat largely meat-based diets, like the standard American diet or any type of standard Western civilization diet, they're also going to be at largely increased increased chances of having vitamin B12 deficiency because of the large amount of meat and processed foods that they're getting. And you may say, well, wait a second, but meat has vitamin B12 in it. Shouldn't that actually, kind of protect them from having any kind of B12 deficiency? And the answer is no, not really, because if you remember, the biggest problem that people come up with, or the biggest reason that people develop vitamin B12 deficiency is not because they're not getting it, it's because that they are not producing intrinsic factor, and there's some kind of gastrointestinal problem that's causing them to not to be able to absorb vitamin B12. So in that way, diets that are really high in meat that may cause a lot of gastrointestinal distress are actually going to promote vitamin B12 deficiency. Now, also diets that are high in processed refined foods will cause the same type of thing. Diets that are really low in fiber could cause those same types of symptoms, and as a result, that person might also be at increased chances of vitamin B12 deficiency. So, when they used to think that vitamin B12 deficiency was mostly a vegan or vegetarian thing, or people that didn't eat animal products, whereas the statistics now are showing that I think that those are still stand out. Like vegans and vegetarians probably are a larger per capita statistic, but that's really a difficult statistic to determine because of the fact that there's so few vegans and vegetarians to study that per capita, looking at that versus the general population, vegans and vegetarians comprising, I think it's up to 2% of the total American population now. But that makes it really difficult to look at that because the pool of people that they can actually study to determine those types of statistics is so small in relationship to the countless millions of people that are eating largely animal-based diets that it's really difficult to kind of make that association. But nevertheless, from what we know, vegans and vegetarians probably are at somewhat increased risk, but the number of people that eat largely animal-based diets or animal product diets like meat, dairy, eggs, and that kind of thing, they're actually much higher than what was previously thought. So vitamin B12 deficiency is something that really everyone should kind of be conscious of, and that occasionally, it's not a go-to test that you're going to see when you get a BMP, a basic metabolic panel, or just your regular blood work. So it almost is something that you would kind of have to request. But some things that you should keep in mind if you do have a vitamin B12 deficiency is that for most people, just taking a supplement like a pill, a vitamin, or something like that will generally do the trick. That'll actually provide most of the vitamin B12 that you would ever need. But if you are in the category of somebody that's had gastrointestinal distress, then remember that eating a fortified food like soy milk if you're a vegan, or whatever the case may be, animal products that would have vitamin B12 in it, may not actually do you any good, and that would include vitamins. So in that case, the person would have to use an injection. And what usually happens is that you'll get the injections every 30 days. I've seen some people on YouTube talk about getting them every day. In a clinical setting, I've never seen anyone that actually got vitamin B12 injections on a daily basis. I would think that would potentially be dangerous, and that person should probably do a bit more research on what they're choosing to inject into their body, and especially in the amounts that they're choosing to do it in. But nevertheless, the normal standard is that you may get a large injection on your first go round, and then every 30 days after that you would have a kind of follow-up booster to get further injections. And that's kind of how I've seen it done. Maybe there's other standards and protocols. I don't give the injections. Dietitians don't really have anything to do with that. We just usually talk to people about their diet. But I do obviously see a lot of people in different situations that are having that done. So the injections would probably be the go-to thing for somebody that has had some of those experiences that may have impaired their ability to produce intrinsic factor, whereas the rest of us, I just take kind of a vitamin B12 supplement every few weeks or so, and on a daily basis I eat fortified foods like soy milk and things like that that may or may not be well fortified with it. I don't know. Obviously the supplement is, and I don't really have any symptoms that would show that I have vitamin B12 deficiency, so I'm thinking, at least for me, it's doing the trick. Now, when I mentioned that some of the symptoms are problematic or it's difficult, a lot of those things like depression, they're associated with other things too. So just because you have depression or you have some type of one of the other symptoms of vitamin B12 deficiency, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have vitamin B12 deficiency, because those are things that are so general and so well tied to many other factors that it really becomes a difficult thing to diagnose just based on symptoms. And usually your doctor will be reluctant to give the test because whatever symptoms you're describing to him generally are associated with something else. The one that stands out usually as being specifically more narrow and less broadly associated with other diseases is the neurological things where you're constantly feeling the tingling in your fingers and you feel weak and kind of emaciated. That usually will point to being specifically vitamin B12 deficiency. So those are just a few ideas, a few things for you guys to consider. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, click like, and if you think you might know somebody that would benefit from it, I'd appreciate it if you shared the video on other forms of social media. And until next time, you guys take it easy.